morning, everyone. My name is Karen Orsi, and I am honored to be here. When Jeff asked me, would you be interested in talking about music on a Sunday morning at Channing, I was like, absolutely. I'm so happy to do this. I love music. I think about it all the time. Then something funny happened. As I'm trying to write my 10 to 15 minutes, there was so much to write about. I realized that music has been in my life for over 20,000 days. And I had to kind of think about that and then reel it in a little. Like, I know there's so much that you could talk about every day, from growing up in the Catholic Church and hearing the hymns. And, when I was younger, I'd be hearing these hymns, but I'd be thinking about whether I was going to have eggs or pancakes for breakfast. I wasn't thinking about the music. And then something would happen. Once in a while, a hymn would play, and the goosebumps would come, and there would be some connection that I didn't even understand. And this has gone on pretty much every day for most of my life. But one thing I was able to find, a common thread, is when Jeff shared with me that there would be some Beatles songs involved. And that's where it brought this all back for me. And I will tell you why. So I grew up in a very musical household. I'm the youngest of six. And my parents, all of us in a 3-bedroom ranch house, and each of us listening to very different music. And my dad loved Vivaldi, my mom loved Barbra Streisand, my brother loved country music, my other brother loved Rush and prog rock, my sister loved New Wave and the Jackson 5, and my oldest sister was an opera singer. So I grew up hearing her singing Night of the Queen's aria and just all sorts of amazing music. And so as I'm growing up, I finally got my own turntable, and I couldn't believe it. I'm like, all right, and then I got some albums, and one of those albums was the Beatles live at the Hollywood Bowl. Something changed in me when I put that album on. My parents would be walking by, and I would be doing this. I'd be playing air guitar and going, ooh, and my parents looked at that, and they said, you know what? I think we'd better get her a real guitar. This is maybe a little bit pathetic, the air guitar. So on Christmas, I was 13 years old, I got my first acoustic guitar. And I was absolutely thrilled. I couldn't believe it. I could finally be a Beatle. But then something else happened. I picked the guitar up, and I said, oh boy, this is going to be a lot of work. It's not just standing in front of the mirror and pretending you're a Beatle. There was a lot to learn. So one of the things that I had was a chord book, and I had my albums. So from the age of 13 to 18, I was a self-taught musician. I wouldn't call myself a musician for those first few years. I was maybe picking up a few notes and a chord, but it was really fulfilling nonetheless. And I felt like I was kind of part of everything with the music that I loved. So I had my guitar, and now it was time to learn how to play it. Back then, and many of you may be of my age as well, where we didn't have internet, right? So a lot of times now, you'll see people learning by using YouTube or tab apps. I have a lot of students that use those, and it's wonderful, but I had none of that. So what I had to do was listen to the album, put a little piece on, put it back, play it again, try to play it, put it back, and I still have the albums and all of the scratches to prove it. Just terrible sounding albums now from doing that, where of course it's a lot easier now for anyone trying to learn guitar. But another wonderful thing happened once I turned 18 and I went to college. I finally had access to some music instructors. And I went to Rhode Island College, and I took classical guitar and music theory, and it was absolutely amazing to finally be able to name what I was doing. And I'm going to do we're going to grab my guitar and do a little demonstration over here for you. This is one of my, can you hear me okay? This is one of my acoustic guitars, and her name is Martina Navratilova. So she is a Martin guitar, and my student asked me, does she have a name? So I decided that would be appropriate since I love guitar and tennis. And that's something, if any of you are musicians and have guitars, you may, or even if it's cars or anything that you have a passion about, you may find yourself naming what you have because it's just becomes such a part of you. So this is Martina, and I'm going to show you the first chord I ever learned on the guitar, and you all can play this chord immediately, I promise you. Here we go. Believe it or not, that is a chord. That is known as the E minor 11. And when I've taught over the years, I've taught rock camps and at after-school programs. And you have students who are like, I'm never going to be able to play the guitar. I'm like, go ahead and do that. I'm like, you are now playing the guitar. So it gives hope, and then it also gives you a way into the guitar. But my first chord, when I had my guitar for Christmas, I had my chord book. The first one I learned is one that might also be very familiar to anybody who has either listened to or played music. Does anyone know what chord that is? Right, the C chord. And in music, there's a reason that the C chord is often one of the first ones, and in the C scale, because there aren't any black keys on the piano, right? There aren't any sharps or flats, so it's easier to learn reading music and such. So I was very excited to learn that. And one of my first songs was, does anyone know that? I have a brand new key, I have a brand new pair of roller skates. So that was one, and then a Waylon Jennings song called Honky Tonk Heroes. So C allowed me into a lot of songs. One thing I soon discovered while I was playing is that the Beatles are actually quite complicated to play. There was a song called It's Only Love that was one of my first ones to learn because I had a C to an A minor, which are pretty easy to play. So that was my way in, and then when I was in college, I started learning that, why is a C chord so happy? Why does it sound so happy? And it's because of the intervals it's made of. So one thing I've learned is that intervals are sort of like the magic thread through all of music. Intervals make up scales, they make up chords, so it's a way in. So this very common sounding interval here is what's known as the major third, and it makes up all major chords. And then you add in this other interval, and that is what's known as the perfect fifth. So it was really neat to be in college and learning what these things meant, and then going on to take private jazz lessons and getting deep into memorizing all of the modes. But one thing I learned soon was, if I have all of this memorized, like, what is the point of that for me? So I kind of went back to learning a lot of stuff by ear, making it more organic for me. Where I had other friends who went on to become classical musicians and teachers in school systems. But for me, I like that organic of knowing, but then kind of forgetting what's making it up. And there's just one other chord I want to show you. I was teaching at these Girls Rock Rhode Island camps. It was supposed to be a weekend thing. Someone said, we'd like to teach a little bit of guitar for a weekend. I'm like, sure. And it ended up being for 10 years, which was wonderful. These camps, we had ladies camps and girls camps. And what we would do in a weekend is we would teach an instrument, often to someone who had never played an instrument before. They would form a band, they would write a song, and then they would perform for all of their family and friends in 3 days. So it was really amazing. So this one chord, I want to show you one more. This is what's known as the 5th chord, or a power chord. And this is what makes up a lot of like punk rock. Right, you might recognize that, a little Nirvana. But this chord is really powerful because you don't have to do a whole bar chord. If you know anything about the guitar, bar chords are one of the hardest things to play. You do like partial, and then you can move it all along the fretboard, and you have 12 chords at your disposal. So that's how we would use those. So that's just a little bit of Martina for you, and then go back and talk a little bit more about the music. So if you can't tell, I absolutely love music. I'm so passionate about it. Again, it's every day. It has been in my life, and I am so thankful for that. After college, it was interesting. Well, actually, in college, I was in a cover band, and I got to play with bandmates, and I started to learn about community of playing music with others. Sure, some of the bands, there might have been a couple of egos that made it difficult, but it's not unlike any time you have friends or family, and you have to try to figure out those relationships. So that in my 20s, it was just amazing. I got to go to Glasgow, Scotland as well, and do some busking. And I lived there for a year, and I had my first student there, a lad from Norway. And I got to start teaching him the little bit that I knew. And something happened when I'm teaching him and I see his face, that moment of recognition, right, that we probably all get, whether it's music related or something we want to learn or something we finally understand. And it was just very profound to see that. And I knew I wanted to do more teaching. So then I come back to the United States. I end up in a bunch of bands and late night clubs, smoky clubs, rock and roll, very loud. Back then, you were allowed to smoke in clubs, which was awful. So you'd be singing and then you could barely breathe. So I was very happy when that went away. But during that time, I learned a lot. And in our 20s, we're kind of like, we're going to do something with this. There were a lot of us who were like, we're going to make it. We're going to become musicians. We're going to quit our job at the sandwich shop and just make a go of it, right? And of course, it's very rare for that to happen. So we all got our regular full-time jobs. And then in my 30s, it was really amazing because I started getting into bands again. And then I met my late husband in the studio. So this was a whole other level of connection where you're making friends, but then, you also really make these profound connections. And we did a lot of recording, and we were able to share this wonderful life of music making and marriage before he passed of cancer 12 years ago. And I'm still, music, it just really brings up for me how it's with us through everything, no matter what you're going through, happy things, sad things. To have that through loss and grief it's very comforting. But then joyful things like weddings and, watching my nieces and nephews have the next or most recent generation and watching the kids grow up and seeing what they love for music. And it's wonderful. A lot of them love the Beatles. I was like, wow. And the younger nieces and nephews, the students, again, it's this thread of the Beatles that it seems to come back to. So then my oldest sister, also before my husband passed, when we first got married, she sang the Ave Maria at our wedding. And I can tell you that was the most spiritual and profound moment I've ever experienced with music. I think partly because I was getting married and, it was my sister who I looked up to and would watch her doing opera practice in the bedroom, and then for her to be singing this pure, beautiful song at my wedding. It was just amazing, and the goosebumps are here to prove that. So this is just to say that there's so much in music for all of us, right? I'm sure each of you can remember a time where you heard a certain song and you were like, that is the song. Or you hear a new song, or even in the supermarket. You know, you're just trying to get your groceries, and then all of a sudden, it's like, oh, yes, I feel that connection now. So it's wonderful. And I had mentioned, too, about the teaching. So the Girls Rock, teaching for them for 10 years was really amazing on a different level, because there were so many different students from different backgrounds. There were a lot of disadvantaged youth who never had access to an instrument. A lot of times in the school systems, they don't have music. They don't have the money to provide instruments. So we were able to do that, and to see how much that meant to them was absolutely amazing. So that was a lot of my 40s and 30s I've been talking about. We'll get into the more spiritual side, even though this has been spiritual. My 50s. This is where it really brought a profound appreciation for me for music. I was still playing in bands. Something happened. So when you're playing in bands, a lot of times you're setting up gear and it's really loud and you're playing pedals and you get home and your ears are ringing. I discovered in my 50s that I really love the acoustic guitar. I think I'm going to go back to that for a while. So I ended up playing a lot of acoustic, very simple, going back to just wood and metal and the vibrations of the wood to make sound. It was wonderful. And during this time I had a lot of losses. My husband passed. Lost 3 of my brothers, and then earlier on, my parents had passed. And as I'm sure all of you, I wish none of you have experienced loss, but I'm sure we all have. And there was one song during this time that got me through in a most amazing way, and that was "Across the Universe" by the Beatles. There was just something to the lyrics of that and the music, where there was a hopefulness to it. Also a feeling, making sure that you feel the loss, but that you also recognize just the light that is around all of us. And then, so that was my 50s, and now we're on to my 60s. So I turned 60 in December. I'm very excited about it. I know maybe a lot of people aren't happy to turn 60. But I was really pleased after seeing so much loss. Also the idea of, wow, I'm still here. And one of my things every day that I think about is I get to do this. And it just kind of brings everything back. When it's a sad day, I make sure I feel the sadness. I'll listen to a sad song. I'll listen to the Beatles also tell me to take a sad song and make it better. Like, all right, I can do that. But again, it's just so profound to have music in our lives, and I'm just appreciative of it every single day. And one thing is for certain, there will always be music. As Jeff said in his reading, I mean, even when we're not here and the earth is no more, Chuck Berry is going to be out there. He's going to be doing his thing. And I just thank you all for having me here. I really, it's just, I'm profoundly grateful. And one thing about music too is even if there's no music playing, right, you can hear it, right? So think about when a tune pops in your head and you're like, oh yeah. So no matter what, there is always music. But one thing that we probably all know that we do not want is, and it's the one problem with being able to hear the music in your head, is to be earworm. So, has anyone ever had the experience of the earworm and know what it means? Yes. And I'm not going to sing any of mine because I don't want them to infect you. But that would, I'd say, be the only drawback of being able to hear music in your head. And I just want to say I wish you all days filled with beautiful music and no earworms. No earworms. So, thank you.